Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette, and we're so glad you're with us today to stay curious. Today with Burt Dicht, who is a great space geek and here on the Space Coast helping run the National Space Society. Hey, Burt.
Mark, great to be here.
Well, glad to have you here. We're going to hear a little bit about this fascinating man's life, how he got started in space. We all have a path that got us into it somewhere or another. And hear about a little about his career, some fascinating things I don't know about. When we racked up the slides there, Burt, you were involved with some aircraft and things like that, and now you're involved with a society that Werner von Braun helped found.
That is
as
correct.
A way.
Started as the National Space Institute by Werner von Braun.
Scoot up there just a little bit closer.
Sure.
There. Yeah,
there we
go.
Okay.
Sorry.
And now we are the National Space Society, and we opened an office last year at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex. So I manage that office.
And we've got Gabriel Rothblatt.
He's one of our board members. Yes.
Right. And Jennifer
Muntz.
Shout out to Jennifer there. She does everything you ask her
She's
to do,
my colleague. We work together very closely.
Go.
Absolutely.
And you've all become colleagues and partners of us here. And we're so pleased to make that connection with the National Space Society. In the coming month or so, we're going to announce a membership drive campaign for both of us where you can mutually join the American Space Museum or National Space Society for a combined fee there.
And we're also looking to explore.
There you are.
Yeah, there I am. We're also looking to explore other opportunities, Mark, to work together. We see a great synergy between what you're doing, especially in the education areas, and inspiring the next generation. So it's exciting. And I know
synergy is the right word.
Exactly.
It is. Every time I get together with Burt or Jennifer or Gabriel, sparks are flying. Our brains are full of ideas, aren't they?
Many ideas.
We just need people to help execute them and money to back it up, like these space shots that are going
that
on today.
Would be really nice.
Yeah.
Anyone out there, we're willing to take the money.
Absolutely. Two nonprofits, and we'll play a hand of poker and split up 60-40 or something.
Sounds good.
Wanted to mention that Marty's not here today, nor Selvin. Both of them had obligations, and I'm running the board by myself. So I hope we're streaming out there. I'm not looking at the comments. I see there's some comments way over there. So no one's reading your comments. I didn't get that set up to do that. But we'll look at them later.
Sure, absolutely. If anyone has any questions, that type of thing.
Absolutely. Sorry we can't take your questions with Burt today, but we're going to have him back many times to more talk about the nuts and bolts of the NSS events you're doing.
Right.
But today we want to kind of just get to know you a little bit better.
Sure.
But we want our Stay Curious people out there to realize that got some interesting space missions coming up here. The next 48 hours, or particularly the next week, are filled with space activity here on the coast.
Yes, tomorrow is the big day. We're expecting the landing of Intuitive Machines Nova C on the south pole of the moon.
Odysseus.
Yes, known as Odie. So that is really exciting because this is a commercially developed lunar lander, and it will be the first successful American landing since Apollo 17 in December of 1972.
Mm-hmm.
So that is really exciting. So everybody make sure you're watching for that. And we have a connection with the National Space Society. One of our board members, Chantel Beyer, she has a company called For Space. She worked very closely with Jeff Koons, the famed artist, to develop an art gallery in effect that's going to the moon. It's called Moon Phases. There are 1-inch sculptures of the moon, different phases of the moon that align to different people in history. And Chantel's company, For Space, actually designed the container that these globes are in. So obviously you have to survive the launch, you have to survive the environment of the moon. And we were there last Wednesday morning, I guess it was, for the launch on the SpaceX Falcon 9 of Nova C. And just so exciting to have someone who is sending a payload to the moon. I actually said this to her. We were talking on the phone, and I said, "You're sending a payload to the moon?" And she said it never really dawned on her until I said that, because, she was closely tied into the mission, but someone from the outside is saying that, and it was just so exciting. So we're looking forward to it.
Absolutely. We've got the moon is in the sky right now. Did a stargaze with a bunch of homeschoolers with the local astronomy club last night. We're going to do it again Thursday night,
great.
and hopefully tell them that at the very bottom of the moon, look at it with binoculars. I know everybody's got binoculars out there. Okay, get your binoculars. Not on the Earth there, on the Earthrise, but on
Yes.
the moon. And at the very bottom is the heavily cratered area. That's the South Pole, where there's craters that never get sunlight. So there's ice there, we theorize.
Yes.
In gigantic ice cube trays. And all we need to do is just get them there and pop them out, and we can do.
And if
Not
it's water
exactly,
ice,
I'm
as you know, if it's water ice, what can you get? Obviously you can get hydrogen and oxygen, right?
fuel,
and
oxygen,
to breathe.
and water to drink, and all kinds of
Absolutely.
things. That's why it's a gold rush, so to speak, a water rush to the South Pole of the moon. Well, we wish Intuitive Machines well. When you're looking up the moon tonight, the landing. What time's the
I
landing going to be?
believe it is for 5:49 p.m. Eastern
Oh,
time.
wow. That's going to be a
Yes.
great time for everybody to
But
to
check
watch it.
Intuitive Machines website
Yeah.
just to be sure. Any
They're
updates.
going into orbit of the moon here sometime later today, I believe. So that's a big maneuver. Our friend Chris Stott has a Lone Star is his company. They have a hard drive that's going to be put on the moon that is tested out okay. About 6 ride shares from NASA, 6 other ride shares going on. You threw a great party, a pre-launch party. Unfortunately, it got scrubbed that night, but the party didn't. And you had your media.com friends
That's
there,
right.
and a lot of cool kids from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, just up the road here in Daytona.
Yes, Chantel's working with different groups, and media.com is one, and they graciously sponsored the party that we had at the Hilton, and also getting everybody transported out to the Banana Creek viewing site to see the launch. So it was a lot of fun. As you said, we had astronaut Winston Scott and astronaut Nicole Stott stop by. But a highlight too were the students from Embry-Riddle, along with this artwork that's on Intuitive Machines Nova C. Students at Embry-Riddle have something called the Eagle Cam.
Yes, this is fascinating. We can't wait to see this work.
Yes. So the founder of Intuitive Machines, who's an Embry-Riddle grad, challenged the students in a visit to come up with something that could take a selfie of the Nova C as it landed. So Eagle Cam will be ejected from the Nova C just before landing and come down onto the surface and photograph the lunar lander as it touches down. So
Okay.
this is a student designed project. So I didn't do that in college.
Right.
So they're sending a payload to the moon just like Chantel is.
You had a
And-
couple, 3 dozen
Yes.
kids up there that have been working on this. And
Yes,
and,
I'll give a shout out to someone I know, Grace Robertson. Grace was a student at Embry-Riddle and worked on Eagle Cam. She's now an engineer at Sierra Space, but she's also an astronaut scholar from the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation, and she actually spoke to one of our space forums, National Space Society space forums, about all this work and developing something like this when you're a student. So really exciting to see this happening tomorrow.
Absolutely. Landing on the moon, the first private payload to go to the moon. And America, NASA's not landed anything on the moon since like Apollo 17, 52 years ago. So it is going to be very exciting. We're going to be able to see it nearly live. There's an important payload to judge the amount of dust being scattered around, an important thing for visibility on landing, as well as sensors
Yes.
and so forth. So
That is correct.
chock full of a lot of stuff. We've also got a launch of a new crew to the International Space Station coming up, Burt.
Yes, Crew 8 is scheduled to launch just a little past midnight on the 1st of March. So there'll be four astronauts will be heading up to the International Space Station.
And Crew 7 is up there. By the way, they'll be taking up the first American male to be on the space station in 6 months, Mike Barrett, a veteran. Now we've got 2 wonderful American ladies up there, Jasmine Mogali and Laurel O'Hara. Okay, and they'll be coming back probably about a week
Probably a
after
week.
Crew
Yes.
8 docks.
I haven't
right?
seen the actual scheduled date yet, but yes, it's usually about a week after the other crew docks.
Well, let's get into this gentleman's life a little bit.
Sure.
We're talking to Burt Dick here. What I'm going to show you, Burt, is because Marty's not here. I'm doing this on my own, and I've got the period button there.
Okay.
No, not the period button. See the forward and backward.
Yes.
I was going to go over to console and see if anyone did have any questions.
Okay.
We might not want to do that, maybe. Let's get you up here and let me move that around there a second there. All right. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I'm going to go over here and move away there for a second.
Well, sure, Mark.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and lived there until 1981. And then when I graduated college, went to Temple University in mechanical engineering, went out to California, and went to work for Northrop, which was Northrop then, and of course now Northrop Grumman, and designed advanced fighter aircraft. So a lot of fun doing that.
We're going to see some pictures of that.
Yes, I'll be talking more about Northrop shortly.
Steve Jokums says that he's been a member since the Peoria L5 days.
Oh, great.
And Steve,
Welcome, Steve.
Jokums, you'll meet at Shuttle Fest. He's at the Lake County Spaceport, does decals for
Right.
there. Does
Sounds good.
like I said, he couldn't hear me there. Steve Jokums says, greetings, especially to Burt. I've been a member since the Peoria L5 days. Carlton Bailey.
Carlton, sure. Yep. Getting to know a lot of great people here on the Space Coast.
Carlton Bailey, CB's giving a shout out to Tom and Mark Usiak for
Tom and Mark are good
introducing
friends.
Mark's
Yes.
watching. I'm sure Tom will be on there. Gary Gerald and Doug Forrest, we see you on there. And Will
Great.
Whiting, hope you're feeling good. So I may jump back over here, but not taking questions this time, but we're going to get into a little bit of your life here. Hold on.
Sure, let's do that.
Yeah.
Exciting to share. It's been an interesting trajectory. I'll use that word.
Well, here's this was very unique. You put together all the businesses, all the things you've been associated.
Yes, when you mentioned about my background, I decided to just take a look at all the different organizations or companies that I worked for and also volunteer for, because they're all connected. My whole career really has been focused in on aerospace, and today it's more about inspiring the next generation. But for a while there, I was doing it. So I kind of have that kind of experience, but it's so much fun to share what I've done over the years with young people. And especially I do that with, the Civil Air Patrol.
Excellent.
And I'm an aerospace education officer for them. So working with cadets, and the Intrepid Museum. When I lived up in the New Jersey area, I was a volunteer exhibit explainer for the Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum.
Now they have an important vehicle there that Star Trek people helped name.
Enterprise.
Enterprise
is
that's
there.
right.
So yes, that was one of the things that actually got me interested. I was working there at the time for the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. And I saw that they were trying to get a space shuttle. So I went over and said, hey, I might be interested in volunteering. And they said, sure, that would be great. So this is before they actually got awarded the Enterprise. And I started volunteering for them. And sure enough, they got the Enterprise. And my background,
Awesome.
of course, is all aerospace.
Uh-huh.
So, but I learned a lot about the Navy, ships, how an aircraft carrier operates by doing that, but also just being there for the Enterprise. So I actually got to go inside the Enterprise.
How cool is that?
It was pretty cool. It's because it wasn't completely finished for space. It's like when we had to climb through this hatch on the side of one of the main landing gear.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Really?
and yeah, so it was a nice steep climb up there, and then walk on a pathway in the payload bay till we got to the mid deck.
Huh.
So, but a lot of things had been removed already.
Sure.
Yes.
But still, you got to be in the carcass of one in there that did an important
I was disappointed they
approach and landing test.
exactly. I
Very
was disappointed
important
they
vehicle.
wouldn't let us take any photographs.
Oh, really?
So I think they were
Ah.
worried about us posting them, things like that. I would have just kept them to myself. But it really was one of the questions I would get a lot when I was volunteering there was, what's it look like inside? And I wish I'd had a photograph.
Well, this is the Ad Astra magazine. That's your baby now. You've got. Tell us a little bit about the Rod Pyle, who's the editor in chief of this. I was looking.
Well, yes, I'll be talking a little bit more about Ad
Yeah.
Astra later, but Ad Astra is the signature magazine of the National Space Society. We publish it 4 times a year. It is really has changed over the years, and you mentioned Rod Pyle, who is the editor in chief, and he's brought an incredible sense of innovation to it. Great articles, great artwork, great photographs. And we're really trying to say what's happening in space now and what you can expect in the future. Rod is an acclaimed space author. He has a great book out called Space 2.0 about where we are now with the new space, that type of thing. So he brings a great perspective and works to get really relevant articles about what's happening now in space. So that's one of the key things that people join National Space Society for, is to really learn about what is happening in space now. And we try to do our best to keep them informed.
And you do a great job. It's very visual. We'll talk about that a little
Yes.
bit later. We'll be talking about it more on Stay Curious. Well, something I'm curious about with our guest Burt Dicht here is, how did you get involved in space? What was one of your inspiration aha moments? I've got to have this.
Years ago, the AIAA, the American Institute for Aeronautics and Astronautics, had a campaign out. When did you know? So they asked engineers who are members and scientists, anyone who's working in aerospace, to talk about what inspired them. And I really have to point back to Christmas Eve, 1968, because yes, I heard the television on in our living room. I went downstairs and my oldest brother, Jerry, was watching TV, and I said, "What are you watching?" And he said, "Well, the astronauts are around the moon." And I'm like, I had no idea. What are you talking about? And he started explaining to me about the Apollo 8 mission, and I was just fascinated by it. I think from that moment on, I was hooked. So that's when I knew. It was Apollo 8, and we've got Earthrise there, one of the great photographs from Apollo 8.
Yeah, Marty set that up for me as the green screen for us here.
Yes.
And that's always a winner to see.
But it seemed like after that, Mark, somehow every time there was a launch, when there was school, I was sick that day. So
oh, really?
had to watch the launches.
Yeah.
And
happened to be sick.
Just happened to be sick.
Fever. Mom, get the thermometer.
Coincidence, pure coincidence.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's a launch today. Wow. Okay, great. But I was hooked from that point on. And I thought, this is something. I went out. I remember when Apollo 11 landed, and I remember looking up at the moon and just thinking, how did they do that? And I think I said to myself, I want to be able to do things like that as well. And that's what propelled me to engineering.
Well, you got into engineering stuff here, so
Yes.
let's hear a little bit about.
Well, that's a great segue into what I did in high school, because you start progressing to go to maybe engineering school. But my high school, it's Northeast High School in Philadelphia, had a program called Project Spark. Project Spark stood for Space Research Capsule back then. It was started in 1962 by an amazing teacher named Robert Montgomery. He was a physics teacher, and he wanted to inspire kids to get into space science, that type of thing. So he created this student-led program called Spark, where it was a space program they created for an initial budget of $200.
Wow.
And so I've got some clippings up there about the start of it. You can see on that clipping about Northeast High School students embark on outer space. They had spacesuits, they had control panels. They were building a capsule behind the stage at Northeast High School. And The Spark attracted the attention of NASA. NASA actually registered it as an official high school space program. And so Spark was going on when I actually entered into high school. My brother Jerry, who got me interested in space, was a member of Spark. So I became a member of the medical team when I first got into high school, because we had to learn first aid, CPR, we did disaster drills, things like that. But we were progressing back to getting another space program. There was a lot of effort, and then all of a sudden things stopped. So Mr. Montgomery was trying to get things started again, and they asked me to apply to become one of the astronauts when I became a senior. And just like NASA's selection process, it was very rigorous. I was interviewed by existing student members of Spark, that type of thing, and was ultimately selected as an astronaut. So in my senior year, we built our own Apollo capsule simulator in a trailer that was right next to what we called the Spark Wing. And we had a 24-hour mission. So if you go to the next slide.
Are you in the spacesuit? I'm
not
going
there.
To the next one until we figure out which one's
No, I'm not. That's from 1962, 1963. So that's way before my time.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Now, what year did you graduate?
I graduated in 1977.
Okay, 77.
Yeah. So this is Spark Flight 27. You can see it was in April of 1977, my senior year.
Wow.
So I am in the mid, that top right picture. I'm in the middle there.
All right.
Okay, I know what everyone's thinking. I had a lot more hair and a lot less weight back then.
You're right there.
Yeah, right there.
Okay.
So, but you see a picture. I was the flight engineer for this mission. So you see me actually inside the capsule. That lower left picture is we're being interviewed by a reporter from our local Channel 6 News. And my crewmates, Rob Weber and Bruce Burkhoff, both also became engineers as well. And since this was the first flight, we were really trying to just work out the procedures, test out the capsule. It was bare bones type of thing, but it was just one of the most exciting things you can do. I'm doing this as a student. And those are Mercury spacesuits. We actually had Mercury spacesuits.
Where'd you get those?
They got them from the Navy.
Really?
Yes, they were donated by the Navy. So I said,
so
Mr.
realistic,
Montgomery,
and such back in 1975, we'd already finished landing on the moon.
Yes.
Skylab and was over, and ASTP was the last thing.
That's right.
Here, how realistic did that feel to you, Rob?
Well, it was.
I mean, Burt. I'm saying Rob. I'm going Burt. Yeah.
I mean, we weren't obviously lifting off. People asked, "Did we really go into space?" And I'm like, no. But for those 24 hours, we felt like we were on a true space mission, because we were dealing with mission control.
Yeah.
We had an actual control room. There were 3 teams of controllers that are monitoring everything that was happening during the flight. So it was truly an exciting activity. I'm thinking, who does this in high school? It was a STEM program before the term existed.
Right. Did you eat space food?
We had freeze-dried food. Yes. We had freeze-dried food, monitoring of our health. Everything was telemetry. We had electrodes monitoring our heart and breathing.
Real deal. Wow.
A real deal. And that was going back to the control room. And once our 24 hours were over, they got us, and we were actually whisked to the hospital to do medical tests after the 24 hours.
We got the next slide is Spark 2.
Yeah.
Spark
So yeah, this is what you're looking at. I know there's a lot of stuff related to I'm joking, to space memorabilia.
Right.
So that one of all of us, that crew picture, we all autographed that, and Mr. Montgomery autographed that. I don't know if we'll get any money for that, but there's a great demand for astronaut autographs these days, right?
Wow.
So I saved that. And on the right side is our flight plan. So this was a very sophisticated flight plan where everything was mapped out for us, where we were in orbit, and the procedures that we had to do while we were on the mission.
There's some more of it there.
And then, every space mission has a patch. So we named our capsule Excalibur, and this is a shout out to my good friend Tim Gagnon. We said, hey, can we get a patch? So I actually drew this up just as a rough sketch of the idea for our patch. but unfortunately, we didn't have any money to actually have it made. My friend of mine she was a very good artist. She's a volunteer to actually take what I did and turn it into a nice graphic. But I've saved that. And
Yeah.
on the right side is our control panel in the capsule. And
Huh.
I know it looks kind of rough. I was not trained as an engineer then. I went in and actually made that drawing so the rest of the astronauts could study it. So a really exciting time.
What a keepsake. Of course, it's an exciting time. We're going to take on the world. You're
Yes.
almost 18 years old or 18 and looking at college and all that.
Yeah.
Do you still stay in touch with these?
Yeah, we're Facebook friends.
That's
And
awesome.
just to let you know, Spark, like I said, Spark has been around since 1962. What happened about 8 years ago, we found out that the school district was cutting off funding. So all these students it was actually in December, all these students would be left out in the cold. And we heard about this. I, along with some of the alumni, got together and we created the Spark, the Northeast High School Spark Boosters. And we did a GoFundMe campaign. So we raised enough money to keep it going. And by creating this boosters, we were able to raise money and sustain Spark since then. So that's why I have this up there. When I have a chance to ask for some funds, I always like to do that. So Spark is always, the last 8 years, all the funding has come from donors. The teachers now are able to get reimbursed by the school district who support it, but all the other operations are by donations. So I've committed to make sure I'm paying back to what I got out of Spark. So that's why I do this. So if you want to make a donation, it all goes to our Project Spark. So thank you in advance.
There you go. We're now good for you for doing that, continuing that education. I'm sure it's changed a lot since then.
It sure has. Yes.
We'll have you back and talk about that Spark maybe one day.
Oh, I would love
update
to. I
you on
actually did a presentation for the Southeastern Cold War Historical Society because this was
the Cold War Historical Society.
Yes.
That's a new one for
yes,
me, Burt.
yes, and they were very interested because obviously Spark was formed during the Cold War.
Yeah.
So I gave a whole presentation on the history of Spark. Chris Ferguson, I don't know if he's ever been a guest.
No.
Chris he's from Philadelphia.
Okay.
And he has been to Spark. He actually donated.
Oh, really?
And I've talked to him about Spark. He's been back there to talk to students. They made him an honorary flight director one time.
Huh.
So he's...
Well, we'll follow up on that.
Yes.
Have some fun with that one time.
Yes.
Villanova University's in Philadelphia, right?
Yes.
So Andy Allen went there.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
So I asked you if Andy's been involved with
Andy has not been involved, but
Okay.
we've had other astronauts who've come by. Guy Bluford visited Spark. Actually, this was before I graduated. Paul Weitz, Skylab astronaut and Space Shuttle astronaut. He was the first astronaut I ever met. He came to visit Spark.
Wow.
Yes.
Really?
So it's
Paul Weitz, the first astronaut you ever met.
the first
Skylab.
astronaut I ever met. Yes.
Well, let's change and get into another section of your life, your interesting life there. Here with Burt Dicht. He's involved with the National Space Society today here on the Space Coast, becoming a fast friend of our museum. You did an internship, huh?
Yes. Well,
NASA.
I led to, as I said, I decided to go into engineering. And during the summer of 1980, I applied for a NASA internship and was accepted down here at the Kennedy Space Center. So I actually came down over Memorial Day weekend and started the job that week. Truly didn't know what to expect. It was my first time in a kind of professional environment. My position was in facilities engineering design. So I wasn't designing rockets. I wasn't launching rockets. Facilities engineering design was responsible for all the systems related to getting a rocket into space, whether it was the headquarters building or upgrading the VAB or the launch pad. Facilities engineering was designed in that. So we had access to the entire facility. There were mechanical engineers, civil engineers, electrical engineers, architects. So everyone needed to make those types of things. So I had some really great mentors. They were two recent grads from University of Florida, Gators. That's the first time I'd heard the term Gator.
Okay.
And they really helped.
Not many Gators in Pennsylvania.
No. Gators. Okay, great. They really helped me learn and gave me meaningful work to do. It wasn't just make work.
Uh-huh.
I did engineering, and I've got a few things up on the slide here. One of the things I did was I did a lot of the charts for an engineer who was doing work on a valve actuator on the sound suppression system on 39B. So I actually got a chance to go out and watch them dump 300,000 gallons of water as a test.
Wow.
So after I'm putting this report together for him, didn't have computer graphics. That chart you see at the far left there, I actually had to do that by hand. Of course, that's how we did things.
Right.
But I learned something about it because when he produced the report, he thanked all the people who helped make the report possible. And he thanked me. And I'm thinking, I'm a student and he's thanking me. And I always remembered that as something when I became an engineer, to give people credit. So that stuck with me.
Some great mentorship.
That really stuck.
Once in a while sticks out. That's beautiful.
That stuck with me. But I did some work on that. You see the VAB high beta surge tank. I just did engineering drawing. But the most fun I had was developing a test to check the airflow going through the vehicle assembly building.
Oh, really?
So, I had to develop the test.
Now, 500-foot tall structure.
Yes, the
one
largest
floor,
one, the largest one-story building in the world.
Uh,
So they wanted to see the optimum door arrangement to give the maximum airflow through the VAB. And so I devised this test where we had to actually close the doors during the day so the heat built up. And then using some calculations, figuring out which doors to open. And I went out on one of those high bay doors. I don't know if everyone knows there are 7 of them. You can actually walk onto the door, the top of the door. And I was strapped in and we were measuring airflow. So
that is pretty crazy.
That was something. Absolutely. I'm thinking, okay, don't look down.
Well, we've heard some urban legends about workers throwing paper airplanes out
Sure.
that go around and come back in.
I don't know, but it's very
You did
possible.
the airflow on it.
Did the
though,
airflow.
Bert.
It was pretty significant.
Yeah. What was the bottom line thing that we would stay curious about?
Well, I think they determined that certain door openings in the high bay would provide the maximum airflow.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they started doing that afterward. I think it was a very positive test.
You live around here and go into work.
Yep.
You look over there and see a door open occasionally or
Yes.
something. You go like, wonder what they're doing.
Yes, sometimes you see the doors open and you don't know why, but it was a fun thing to do, and I really appreciated the engineer who was in charge of the whole thing, letting me take a really active role. And I wrote the report, so I actually have that at home now in my files.
Oh, cool.
But one thing I would like to share, one funny story, your impressions of working at the Kennedy Space Center. And I said we did some meaningful engineering as interns, but one of my jobs was to replace the paper in the copy machine. Now that might sound pretty simple today, but back in summer of 1980, copy machines had rollers and thermal paper. It wasn't plain paper.
Yes, with inkjet or
so you actually had to take the roll of paper and thread it all the way through the machine like you're doing like a movie projector. So the previous intern, we overlapped for a week, said your job is to make sure there's always paper in the copy machine.
It was in a big roll like paper towels.
It was in a big roll that you would put into the copy machine and thread it through. And then it would cut it. Thermal paper is what it was called. So I said, sure. Yeah, he showed me. Looks easy enough. I was ready. That my name was up on the side there to call me if there was any paper, if the paper was out. So it was funny. I would get calls from engineers who were trying to copy something, and I go over, change the paper, and it was just funny thinking, hey, weren't these the people that got us to the moon? And they're asking a student to do this. So it was just kind of funny at the time. But when you're an intern, you do what you're asked to do.
Absolutely. Paying your dues there.
Yes.
We're talking with Burt Dicht here, who's with the National Space Society. Glad that you joined us. Marty is not here, and Selvin, our backup, isn't here. So I'm a one-armed paper hanger here. May go over and see if there's another comment or two, but we're going to have Burt back on many times to talk about the NSS and our partnership here and things that we're going to do together.
Absolutely.
Got a big event coming up here. We're not going to talk about that much today, but talking about how he got to where he is, and I'm fascinated with a little bit about your career there, Burt. You got to Northrop, which is now, of course, Northrop Grumman,
Yes.
the Grumman company that we brag about. Marty built the lunar modules and merged with Northrop, a great aviation company. So what'd you do there?
Yes, graduating college, I was actually hoping to go back to NASA, but some people might remember in the December of 1981, President Reagan had a federal job freeze. So not much I could do about that. So
Really?
Yes.
Caught in a little political conundrum.
That's
there.
the way it goes sometimes. So I actually applied at different companies. I received a job offer from a Rockwell satellite division in California, received the offer from Northrop, actually was offered to go to officer training school for the U.S. Air Force, and an offer from Bechtel in San Francisco, which wasn't space related. So I ended up taking the job with Northrop in Southern California, and it was a great place to go as an early career engineer. A lot of good people. It's a great company. Started working on the F-20 Tiger Shark, which was a privately developed aircraft that Northrop hoped to sell to foreign nations. So I was in internal configuration systems integration, ultimately worked on the F-5, worked on the F-20, worked on the YF-23. I'll talk about that, and the F-18 Super Hornet. And that was just the emergence of computer graphics at that time, where engineers used to do things on a board. We made the transition to computer graphics, and I would have fun with the computer graphic. You can see the logo I created for the F-20 there. But I also had an opportunity to go out to talk to students. I was invited by the AIAA student section at USC to give an early career engineer's perspective. And that was my start of my speaking engagements. I've done 200 maybe, since then, talking to students all around the world. So it was a great experience, and Northrop really helped me develop as an engineer. So the F-20 was a great program. We ended up
see some other pictures of it.
That's
here.
one of the drawings I did. It's called an inboard profile.
Did you do that drawing?
Yep. And so the idea here is to show the internal arrangement of the aircraft. So a lot of the engineers working in systems, structures, needed to get a general idea of where systems were. I'd like to say I was kind of like a interior designer, working with each of the design groups. Where do you put the systems in the aircraft? And then my job was to document it in this inboard profile. So I got to see the whole airplane. Really exciting.
A lot of work there.
Yes.
And a lot of verification. That's I think it's pretty amazing.
Oh yes.
I thought it'd be a team of people doing that,
well,
not one person.
We had a small group that did different things, but the inboards were my responsibility. Yes. And that's the F-20 there. So we ended up building 3 of those. If anyone does want to go see an F-20, when you're out there to visit Endeavor, it's at the California Science Center.
Okay.
So it's hanging from the ceiling there, one of the remaining F-20s.
Okay. And what was the practical use of this?
Well, the idea was at the time, if you recall, when the Shah fell in Iran, we had given Iran F-14s. So there was a concern about giving frontline fighters away, because how do you protect them then? So they wanted to come up with a kind of a medium fighter that wasn't our best, but could be sold to our foreign nations. And so the F-20 was an example of that. It was an upgrade, complete upgrade from the F-5E, which was flown by a lot of foreign nations. The problem was when President Reagan came into office, they decided to sell F-16s directly to everybody who wanted them. So we were in competition with the F-16, which we didn't plan on being in competition with. So people weren't going to buy an unproven fighter. The F-16 was a proven fighter. So we weren't able to sell the aircraft, but what it did is it built an incredible talent base at Northrop, and helped us win the next program I worked on, which is the YF-23. So that's the Advanced Tactical Fighter. So this was the follow-on to the F-15, a fifth generation fighter that would be stealthy and also be able to go supersonic speed without using the afterburner. And without a doubt, this is probably the most fun you could ever have as an engineer, because everything was possible. People didn't say, well, you can't do it that way because we've always, we've always done it this way. People were willing to try completely new things, and that's exciting when you're an engineer. So we had a tremendous time to do it. And there's another inboard profile that I did for the production version. Unfortunately, we did not win the competition. Lockheed's YF-22 won the competition. But without a doubt, it was an incredibly exciting program to work on, and really helped me develop further as an engineer. And that's actually taken a few years ago. We had a 25-year reunion back in LA with all the people who worked on it from the 25 years from the first flight. So that is the YF-23 right there. I'm standing in front of it. That's at the Torrance Airport, the Western Museum of Flight. So if you want to see one of those, there are only two of them. One is there in Torrance, California, and the other is at the Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton.
Well, I don't care where you work. Getting together with people you worked with 25 years later, that's not a high school reunion type. It
was exciting. The two test pilots were there. So really great experience. So while I wasn't doing space, I was having a good time in aerospace. It's like I tell students, why did I get into aerospace? Because I like things that make a lot of noise and go very fast.
And drawing them is just fascinating.
Yes.
What a meticulous thing to do. Well, you did meet a few astronauts.
Well, one of the things I did when I was working at...
Are we ready for this slide?
Yeah, you can put that up. When I was working at Northrop, I got involved in the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, the Los Angeles section, and actually had become the newsletter editor. I would go to some of their meetings, and they were boring. And I made a comment once, have you guys ever thought about having an astronaut? So when you make a suggestion in a volunteer organization, you own it.
Right, yes.
As you probably well know.
Or if you miss a meeting, they make you president of the organization.
Oh, yes. So they said, hey, why don't you run with the idea? We're very open to having an astronaut come to a meeting. And just by coincidence, maybe a week later, I was doing some research, and a friend called me over and said, do you know who this, there's a guy there. His name was Ray Tingle. He's an engineer there. And my other friend said, do you know who his sister is? And I said, I don't know who his sister is. Well, his sister was Anna Fisher, one of the 6 original female astronauts on the shuttle program. I started talking to him. He used the expression, my sister worked for NASA. Accurate, but left a lot out.
Yeah, a little vague.
So I was talking to him. I said, you think your sister might be interested in coming out to speak to the Los Angeles section of ASME? He said, yeah, I'll ask her. Next thing I know, I'm talking to her on the phone. I'm learning what I need to do to write to NASA to request this, the astronaut appearance office. You had to pay for it. But of course, she was from Southern California. And so she came out along with her husband, Bill Fisher, who was also an astronaut. It was one of the greatest meetings we had. We had over 200 people. People were talking about it for weeks. She even came back after her flight to just fill us in. But that picture that you see there is back in back in January 1984. Again, I know I had more hair and less weight there, but I always kept that picture and always followed her career. She took a break from NASA to raise her family, which is kind of unique for an astronaut, and went back to NASA. After Columbia happened, she was actually going to go to the space station because she was actually involved in getting it developed. But after Columbia, she decided against going back to space. And I saw in some paper or something that she was retiring from NASA. was going to be making an astronaut appearance here at the Kennedy Space Center.
And
So-
a Fisher.
So I flew down to see her. I hadn't seen her in all these years. Stood in line, got, with that picture that I took. And it's my favorite autograph ever because, she remembered everything. And she says to Burt, "We still look good."
Yeah, right.
So
She's a very popular astronaut encounter astronaut out there.
I've seen her many
Very,
times since then.
Yeah.
And
She loves talking
yes.
to the people. She's very reflective. I think
Yes.
she's almost 80 years old, and reflective about her career and just like we all think about life and stuff like that. What a great picture and great story.
great story. I see her at Astronaut Scholarship Foundation events. As you said, she makes appearances here. So I try to see her every time she's here.
And what an influencer you turned out to be, Burt, organizing something like that and continuing to do things. You got talk about this slide. I'm going to go over there and see if we have any other questions here or comments as we talk with Burt Dicht here about your fascinating career. What's going on here,
So
Burt?
what's going on here, this is a STS-9. This was a Space Lab mission for the shuttle. And part of my involvement with ASME, as I mentioned before, I was the newsletter editor. And someone had told me that if you write to NASA on letterhead, that you can get a press pass or a media pass. Well, on our Los Angeles section newsletter, I was listed as the newsletter editor. So I wrote to NASA's Public Affairs Office, and sure enough, I got press passes to the shuttle landings. So I've actually been to 13 shuttle landings at Edwards Air Force Base. And what you're seeing here is STS-9. If people remember STS-9, they had a problem initially before returning to Earth with one of the general purpose computers. So we got there really early for the landing. It ended up they were delayed almost 9 hours until they figured out what the problem was. But you can see I was out on the runway, the dry lake bed there, about a mile away from the orbiter as it came in. And John Young and Brewster Shaw were the commander and the pilot. So one of the nice things about getting the press pass is you can go to the ceremony afterward. The other astronauts, because they were in Space Lab, were put into had to go through medical tests. So just John Young and Brewster Shaw were there for the crew departure. But I was able to go to the press conferences, and that picture in the up on the right where it says NASA and ESA, that's on the left is General James Abramson. Some people might remember him. He was originally a mole astronaut, manned orbital laboratory astronaut, but ended up running the shuttle program for a few years before President Reagan tapped him to run SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative, or Star Wars. So is there a comment or question, Mark?
Yeah, that's what a cool landing to see. The great John Young bringing in his last spacecraft.
That was his last flight. Yes.
That's cool. Yeah, we've got Gary Gerald, our Vidalia onion farmer in Georgia, says, if I'm not mistaken, there's an F-5 at the Valiant Air Museum in Titusville.
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Gary, for chiming in on that. And Larry Pushkar was here with his wife, Pam, yesterday, and he said he had a wonderful visit. Thanks for such a warm welcome. Sorry you got away, Larry. Wanted to give you some swag. So if you're, I got involved with that stargaze we were doing back there. And Dave Stange up in Michigan, one of our ace #1 watchers, says, very cool about your Spark
Yes.
in high school. I always wanted to be in a simulated moon mission back in my teen years, Dave Stange says. And Tommy Usiak says, good afternoon and hello, Burt.
Hello, Tom.
And Tom Celentano up in Connecticut says he was an NSS member since it was the NSI. What was the NSI?
NSI was the National Space Institute, and I have a slide that shows that. That's when I got involved. I actually joined after going to a Star Trek convention in Philadelphia, and I saw a flyer for the NSI. So that's when I joined back in 1977.
Interesting. Well, we love our regulars on there.
Yes.
They're enjoying our
Yes.
conversation with you here. we've got half a dozen more slides here.
Yes.
Talk about
Well,
your fascinating
yeah,
career.
one other thing I did, my love, you can probably tell everybody, was space. Even though I was designing fighter planes and having a good time, I really wanted to see if I could get into the space program. So one point, I just decided to see what I was worth in the open market. Southern California was such a great place to be an aerospace engineer, and Rockwell Space Transportation Systems Division had had openings. They had a job fair, so I went to the job fair, and they liked me, and made me an offer to work on payload integration. So it was a tough decision to leave Northrop. I really liked Northrop, and went over to Rockwell and Downey, which was a great place to be if everyone knows the history of course, where Apollo was designed and the space shuttle was designed. So that other slide there is I was actually involved in payload integration on the orbiters. It was not the job I expected. It was more of being a graphic artist because I really didn't have any engineering to do. I would make those drawings of the payload and the integration of the payload into the payload bay. But it wasn't what I expected. And I missed being an engineer, and I only stayed for about 6 months. Northrop wanted me to come back, so I ended up going back to Northrop. So that was, in the end, the right decision. Yep.
Well, sometimes things work out,
Yes.
but what you want to do, you stuck true to what your passion was. I respect that.
Yes.
We have this slide here.
Yeah. So everybody, what I did after I left engineering, I went to work for ASME, as I talked about, the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, and eventually IEEE, the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. When I worked at ASME, people knew I loved space. I was the expert. Anytime there was something that someone needed about space, they talked to me. And I had done a whole series of presentations called From Goddard to Apollo, where I talked to sections, student branches, members about the history of the space program. The editor of Mechanical Engineering magazine for the 40th anniversary of Apollo 11 wanted to have an article. So he approached me, said, could you write something for the 40th anniversary? And sure, I'd love to do that. So what you see there is the title, The Most Hazardous and Dangerous and Greatest Adventure on Which Man Has Ever Embarked. So I wrote a really good article about 5 different aspects of the design where individuals had to come up with an interesting idea to solve it. And that helped get us to the moon. So that was the whole concept of the paper, of the article. So the article was published in July 2009. People saw it. I got comments, things like that. But because that was the 40th anniversary of Apollo 11, ASME decided they awarded their President's Award to the Apollo 11 astronauts. So they were going to present this at their big conference in Orlando. It was actually in Orlando in November 2009. Buzz Aldrin was the only astronaut who could attend. The others were presented by video. So I had met Buzz Aldrin a few times before, and they decided to give out my article to everyone in attendance. We're talking 1,500 people in this auditorium.
Terrific.
to hear Buzz Aldrin. The editor of Mechanical Engineering was trying to get me to meet with him beforehand, but I got caught in a meeting, and I got to the room late. I was way in the back. Everyone's seated. The presentation starts. So Buzz Aldrin gets up, and he's holding something in his hand. And this is, everybody has their 15 minutes of fame. This was my 15 minutes of fame. So he's holding this in his hand, and he says, this article is one of the best I've ever read.
Oh my gosh, terrific.
So I'm there thinking, wait a second, he's talking about my article, and Buzz Aldrin is saying it's one of the best he's ever read. I was like, this is unbelievable. After his talk was over, I went up and I was able to get a picture with him. And he was talking to me about it. He said, did you write that whole article yourself? I was like, yes, I wrote the article. So it was a really kind of surreal thing. And if you bring up the slide again,
yeah,
that there's a picture in the far lower right where he's holding the article.
Right above my head.
Yeah, you see it right there. And so this was in our company newsletter. So, the caption, of course, is Buzz is saying Burt's article was one of the best he's ever read. After the meeting was over, everybody's coming up to me.
Yes.
So if anyone does want a copy, I'd be glad to pass that out.
I can't wait to read it
Yes.
myself. That's
So-
that is a big moment.
It was
course.
it was fun. It was really
what
fun.
gratification for your writing skills, as well as the moonwalker there acknowledging it.
Yeah, it was
great.
and at the time his wife was there. She was like, they were all both impressed. And
We'll find a way that we can get it out there to Dave Stange and Larry Pushkar.
yeah,
and
I've
Gary
got it on.
Gerald,
I've
all
got
the
it on
middle ones.
PDF. I'd be glad to anyone who wants
we
it.
Can, in fact, what I'll do is maybe I'll post it on Facebook there
Sure,
for on there. So
sure, absolutely. I'll send that
enjoying
to you.
Burt Dicht here. What a life he's led. A little bit of
How we
serious
doing on time? I know
engineering
we're
and-
talking a lot.
Oh,
How we doing on time? We're good.
Yeah, we're
Okay,
good.
okay.
There's no time limit here in there. We
So
got
here's another example of how I've integrated space into my career. At ASME, we were doing these events called early career forums. They were designed to help engineers who are just starting out how to prepare, how to plan, things that I wish I had known when I was an early career engineer. So that's the whole idea of these events. So I organized one when I was with ASME for early career engineers working in the aerospace industry. Ended up getting a vice president of Northrop to come and talk, the vice president of engineering. So that was really good. But I was looking for another keynote speaker. And NSS gives you great opportunities to meet people. There was an International Space Development Conference for NSS here in Orlando. Janet Petro, at the time, was the deputy director of KSC.
There she
I
is.
ended up talking to her and invited her to come to this early career forum that we had in Seattle. So she graciously accepted. We worked on it. She flew out to Seattle and gave a great presentation. So there, I'm presenting our plaque of certificate of appreciation to her for doing it. Actually, I saw her recently, and she remembers the trip very fondly. So it's just amazing how you can do what you like to do and also integrate a lot of new things into it. So even though I was working in a professional association, space was a center point. So.
and remains so.
And because of that connection, the next slide you'll see is she got me a VIP pass to see the launch of STS 129. So that was also November 2009.
November 2009.
Yes.
That's a beautiful launch of Janet Petro. Of course, tell everybody what she's doing now.
Yeah, of course she is now she is the director of the Kennedy Space Center.
129. Hobaugh is the commander. Butch Wilmer, pilot. He's going to be commander of the Star.
Right.
Boeing Starliner. And who'd you have on there?
Nicole Stott was on there.
Yeah. They brought her down from the ISS.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she wasn't on the launch. That's correct.
Melvin, Bresnik, Foreman, and Satcher on board there.
Yes.
That was Atlantis. 31st mission for Atlantis there.
Yeah, so it's nice to go out.
That's your photograph?
That is my photograph.
Where'd you watch the launch?
It was the Banana Creek.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Sweet.
It was just
because of your little Janet Petro coming out there, you got to see that.
Exactly. So it's amazing what you can do when you're volunteering and meeting people, networking, and because I was a member of NSS, I met her at the ISDC again, the International Space Development Conference, and all that came together. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. And there's another thing too. When I was working, this is when I was working at IEEE. I mentioned I was a volunteer at the Intrepid Museum.
Right.
So I actually wrote an article for Mechanical Engineering magazine about all of the engineering it took to move Enterprise from the Udvar Hazy up to the Intrepid. Everything from its flight to putting it on a barge and taking it up the river and plopping it down onto the flight deck of the Intrepid.
Sounds like something's more complicated than just
It
appears to be.
a year of planning. It was a
Wow.
year of planning to get once they were awarded Enterprise, they had lots of things to figure out, and number one, would the flight deck support Enterprise?
There you go.
They had to do a lot of analysis for that.
10
how to,
tons,
yeah,
basically.
how to 75 tons, 150,000
Right.
pounds. But yeah, it turns out there was really no issue. They strengthened a couple of bulkhead areas, but really there was no issue
So
in
you
putting
took
it up.
these photos?
I took those when it arrived at John F. Kennedy Airport. Got a chance to meet Leonard Nimoy, who was a guest speaker at the time.
That's Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah,
there.
that's
Okay.
Leonard Nimoy. Yep. So I had basically a press pass to the landing because I was writing this article. Even though I was a volunteer, I was still invited out. But it was just I don't know if you can see behind me. There's a picture of me. I'll move out of the way here. There you are.
There you
I'm
are.
standing in front. Yeah, I'm standing in front of the shuttle carrier
There he is,
aircraft.
right
There we
there.
go.
Yeah.
And Enterprise. So
Looks like you got flight uniform on there. What do
that's
you got?
my Northrop jacket.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Was Nimoy the only actor from Star Trek there?
Yes, he was the only actor from Star Trek, but
He's the only one
Neil
you needed. In my
Neil
mind.
deGrasse Tyson was there as
Uh-huh.
well. A few astronauts were there. In fact, I was explaining one of the reporters was.
Is this one of the next slide?
The next slide is just some other activities at the Intrepid, because I became the. Oh, let's see, it's working.
There we go.
I became the space expert. So, for Intrepid. So
Lucky you,
so
everybody's saying there.
Yeah, anytime astronauts would come by, they would always ask me to work and escort them. So you see Sandy Magnus and Sunita Williams there.
Sunita Williams at the top left
Yep.
there.
Yep, and Mike Massimino, who was a consultant to the Intrepid. So that's actually the day they moved a T-38. They were able to get a NASA T-38 to put on display. So what a really great guy he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've listened to his
Yes.
podcast
Yeah.
with Garrett Reisman,
Yes.
two funny astronauts. New York skyline in the back, and
Well-
Sandy Magnus there in the bottom.
Yep. Met to the entire crew of the STS-135. They all came to the Intrepid. And
So you have a bit of astronaut wrangling in you yourself.
I was
like
doing and I was really flattered that they would ask me every time an astronaut comes, because there are a lot of volunteers. They would always ask me to help out, because a lot of times it would be in their auditorium. They wanted to have kids, so I gave a pretty good connection. Yep.
Okay. Well, we're really enjoying this. I'm going to talk now a little bit about the National Space Society's magazine Ad Astra organization, somewhat there. What you got here?
So one of the great things about moving our office here to the Kennedy Space Center is we were able to gather things that were in our storage facility. And I'm also an historian. I've got an advanced degree in history as well as my engineering background. So I love
Okay.
space history. So I started going through some of the materials, and I found this newsletter that announces the formation of the National Space Institute and you see a picture of Wernher von Braun in that picture. So I want to start going through some of these materials to see if I can put together a true history of NSS, with formerly NSI, and also the L5 Society. We merged with the L5 Society in 1987. NSI merged with L5. So it's a really interesting history. For those of you who don't know, we're a space advocacy group, and our goal is thriving communities, living in space, and using those resources for the betterment of mankind, or humanity, as I should say. So it's a really great organization. I started out as a member, and as I mentioned, back in 1977, went to the very first International Space Development Conference in Los Angeles in 1982 when I was a young engineer. And I guess I've been hooked ever since with National Space Society.
National Space Society, in its main vehicle, the Ad Astra magazine here, has always promoted the fact that we need to be a multi-planetary species, not just for global warming, but the sun is halfway through its life cycle. It
Right.
might last another 4 billion years. we don't know when it's going to do something in 1,000,000 years or 100,000 years that could
We're
wipe Earth out.
one of our leading individuals, Mark Hopkins, passed away last year. He was instrumental in the growth of the National Space Society, and he had this saying that we're winning, and not as a bragging thing. What he was talking about was that when you see what's happening in the space industry, especially the emergence of new space, people are finally talking about people living and working in space permanently. And that's one of our goals. How do you get there? So that's what he means by we're winning. Technology has advanced. SpaceX has made tremendous changes to the space paradigm by getting us lower cost to space, that type of thing. So what we're trying to do is get that word out. We're trying to inspire the next generation. We are trying to inform the public about the benefits of this, because people still don't know there's a space program, believe it or not. I met a lot of people at the Intrepid who would ask me, "Oh, does NASA still exist?" And I've talked to some of the staff at the visitor complex who they hear the same thing. They don't even know that NASA still exists, that there's a space program. So for some of us, it's part of our everyday lives.
Right.
But how do we get others to understand the importance of it and the benefits of space technology? And I think that's one of the reasons I'm so proud of what Chantel was doing with her effort, because she's actually trying to bring art into this as well. That, we think about science and technology, and getting different types of companies involved in space. Think about it. If you have a space settlement, obviously you need everything to keep people alive, but don't you also need consumer products? So she's actually reached out to companies like Procter and Gamble, who normally wouldn't think about space, thinking, yeah, there could be something for us too. So it's a really great way to think about how we look at the future of space exploration and space settlement.
We're going to need a lot of food.
Yes.
Putting people in space.
Absolutely.
That's another thing to look at. And every issue of Ad Astra magazine's got wonderful stories about all these problems they have for years. The problems never change, or the vision never changes.
Right.
It's the solution of getting there as our society advances, and people don't realize how everything you touch, starting with that smart phone that everybody's carrying around.
That's right.
With the camera in it better than many of the 35mm cameras that used to be out there, has really affected our lives out there. Burt, we've enjoyed this. There's always some conferences to go to.
I think there's one more slide.
You've got this.
I'd just like to tout our International Space Development Conference. I mentioned this. I went to the very first one in 1982, so this will be the 42nd ISDC. It's going to be in Los Angeles over Memorial Day weekend. We have a great lineup of people coming, great speakers. You see Jose Hernandez is one of the astronauts who's going to be there. Susan Kilrain's going to be there. Alan Stern from New Horizons. So we've got some great sessions. I definitely would invite people to come out and meet some of us and meet some of our guests. One of the things that's great about ISDC is it's really for everybody. You will have great opportunities to meet and mingle with all the guests, talk to them, and learn so much about what's happening with both the National Space Society and what's happening with our space program. So hopefully you can join us in Los Angeles.
Excellent. I've gone over here to the board because we miss Marty and Selvin both today. Jose Hernandez, certainly a friend of ours. We've planned to do a book signing, wine tasting, and other things that Marty's involved with. And Marty's talking to Jose almost on a weekly basis, so something to look forward to. Got a lot of great comments here. Steve Jokums of the Lake County Spaceport again says, outstanding stories. Burt has been one lucky person, though he didn't use the word person. I saw the Sean plays too much. Saw the F-20 at California Science Center. Very cool.
Oh, great.
I'd never heard of it before. Mark Usiak says, great show today. Stephen Greer has a question. When you moved Enterprise, how did y'all operate the landing gear on her?
I don't remember what they did with the landing gear.
Okay.
I honestly couldn't tell you on that one. I know they had a group of engineers from United Launch Alliance who escorted the Enterprise and worked with the curation team at the Intrepid, but I'm not sure what they did with the landing gear.
All right. Cliff Watson is in Pomona, Australia, getting healed up from a little medical emergency. He says, "Hi, guys. Hi back at you." And Doug Forrest, I think you know Doug is
Yes,
an
I do.
artist.
Yep, yes.
He says, "I'm going to be exhibiting along with my fellow IAAA artists at the ISDC show in LA." And with that,
great.
I'll say that's enough acronyms, and I'm gonna
That's one of the first things you learn when you get into engineering. Is I would like to give a shout out this week because it's Engineers Week.
Oh, well,
It is
appropriate
not-
that we
it-
have you
it's
on
National
here.
Engineers Week. So thanking all the engineers who paved the way, all the current engineers who are doing amazing things, and the next generation of engineers. So happy Engineers Week, everybody.
And well, that's a great way to say happy engineering day to you.
Thank you so much,
Our
Mark.
number one engineer now on Stay Curious here. Thank you so much. I enjoyed it a lot. We can't wait to have you back and talk some more nuts and bolts and some of the events
Yes,
going on here.
Absolutely. We have a lot that's coming up with 321 Day,
Yeah.
Shuttle Fest.
We're
gonna be working
celebrating
with
the
you.
area code 321 being brought here by our late friend Ozzy Osband on March 21st. NSS has really taken the lead on that to make it a fabulous thing. We've got our Shuttle Fest April 13th, and then we'll have some other events going on there.
Sounds
Well,
good.
I've got to go over there and push the button out there.
Okay.
Well, I want to ask you going out. I forgot what I was asking you going out. But remind everybody again what's happening tomorrow afternoon.
Well, everybody, just make sure you're watching online. Nova C will be landing on the moon, so we are all going to be cheering that on. So hopefully you can join the Intuitive Machines website. You can find it all there. So I will definitely be watching that, and hopefully we'll be able to be celebrating a moon landing.
Absolutely, by a private company. They have on YouTube, just do Intuitive Machines. They have a live update of what's going on there.
There's a tracker.
That's
on,
right, a tracker
on
on
YouTube. Yes.
So, Burt, thank you so much for being a friend of the museum. Comment about the museum. That's what I was going to ask you.
Sure. I didn't know about this museum until maybe about 5 years ago. I was here visiting one of the events, and someone said you should go by and visit the American Space Museum. So I came by and said, this is fabulous because they celebrate engineering. They celebrate the people who actually make all this possible. I know we celebrate astronauts, but it takes a lot of people to make a space program and to get a rocket into space and to get astronauts into space and get them home safely. So this is a great celebration of those people. So I definitely encourage you to swing by the American Space Museum. I'm also a big supporter of your memorabilia auctions.
Good.
Not that I need more stuff,
Right.
but when I'm always fascinated by all the great things that you have to offer that tell the history of our space program.
And it's a great education of things you never thought existed out there, even if you don't have the money to buy some of it
Absolutely.
in there.
So
So,
definitely make your stop by here in Titusville, and you're right across from the Kennedy Space Center as well. So it's a great place to be.
and you can get your copy of the National Space Society's Ad Astra in here. So
Absolutely.
I'm off camera, but we thank everybody, Burt, for a wonderful show today. And I think you know how I go out on my shows. Would you join me by saying that we hope everybody comes back and sees Stay Curious? Why? To bridge the space between us.
To bridge the space between us. Sounds good, Mark.
All right, buddy. Thank you so much. Y'all come back tomorrow. We've got Terry White is bridging the space between us, taking your questions and talking about a couple of shows in the month of February. Then Saturday we'll do some talk about hopefully landing on the moon and some future space history here. So until next time, I'm Mark Marquette saying thank you so much for watching this show. And yep, we will be bridging the space between us there.